Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very warm welcome to Oxford and this conference. This is the third conference on contemporary South Caucasus issues that is being organized jointly by LINX and the Russian Eurasian Studies Center here at St. Anthony's College. Yesterday, the world commemorated the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. And I'd like to ask you to stand for a minute, please, to commemorate those who suffered in that war and those who have suffered since, particularly those in the area of the South Caucasus. Thank you. Well, the theme of this year's conference is Regional Cooperation in the South Caucasus, Elusive but Necessary. And we have an impressive array of speakers for you today, and we're particularly pleased to be able to welcome representatives from the European Union, the OSCE, and the United Nations. LINX has been doing important work in the region on confidence-building measures, and also through working with young professionals and parliamentarians. And this conference is being held in the framework of the EU program on Nagorno-Karabakh, which is an initiative to support peace in the region. So I would now like to ask Tolvo Kar, the UN Special Representative for the South Caucasus and conflicts in Georgia, to make a few opening remarks. And the biographies of all the speakers you will find in your folder. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation, and specifically to the Russia and Eurasia Studies Center and LINX for organizing this conference. The topic chosen by the organizers is a challenging one, even more so in the context of ongoing global processes and the moment of chaos, to quote High Representative Mogherini, and the strategic uncertainty the world is undergoing, which one way or another are impacting on the region. How can the South Caucasus be defined? Often a region, and this is certainly true of the South Caucasus, is defined in political and/or geographic terms. But these should not be the only criteria. 27 years now following the restoration of their independence, each of the three South Caucasus countries is developing its own way and is also seeking relationships with and integration into different organizations, alliances, and with key players in the world and the region itself. One could say that this is part of realpolitik. However, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia are also all members of the United Nations, the OSCE, and the Council of Europe, and have thus assumed rules-based obligations and commitments. This is important, as these obligations and commitments do not recognize dividing lines, but uphold values and principles as a basis for action. This is what the EU expects the three South Caucasus countries to live up to, and supports them at the regional and bilateral level in the framework of the Eastern Partnership as a joint, inclusive, and transformative initiative. How could the South Caucasus countries benefit from the strategic location of the region? I hope this will be an important part of today's discussion. The EU wants Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia as partner countries to help release the full potential of our neighboring South Caucasus region as a strategic gateway between Europe and Asia. This would foster stability and security and prosperity in the entire region and beyond. This is in the best interest of our partner countries, and it is in the best interest of the EU too. I expect today a thought-provoking discussion on the interplay of internal, regional, and wider international factors that could help attain or, instead, hamper this goal. Resilience starts at home. This makes me recall our shared commitment in the Eastern Partnership framework to fundamental values, including democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, a functioning market economy, sustainable development, and good governance. Poverty, inequality, a perceived sense of injustice, corruption, weak economic and social development, and lack of opportunity, particularly for young people, can be roots for instability, increasing a society's vulnerability to radicalization. The South Caucasus region, in terms of security, economy, and development, has been severely impacted by unresolved conflicts, which all have their own specificity. These conflicts have torn countries and the region's social fabric apart, and they now stand in the way of regional cooperation and the opening of borders. They hamper democratic development and don't allow all citizens to exercise their fundamental freedoms. For the EU, the current situation and lack of movement towards conflict resolution is obviously unacceptable. Together with my fellow UN and OSCE Geneva International Discussion co-chairs, the EU therefore pools efforts in addressing the consequences of the conflicts in Georgia. This is not an easy task, and it has become even more difficult of late. The EU also actively supports the efforts of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs towards peaceful resolution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and I just spent 2 days in meetings in Baku last week. The conflicts have certainly shaped the three countries. No one should forget human tragedy, loss of life, and broken destinies. The societies are struggling to overcome the pain. Yet the years of restored independence have also brought a lot of change in terms of development, of which each partner country is justly proud. I also believe that a forward look beyond the horizon should help us see the benefits deriving from conflict resolution and arising opportunities for partner countries and the region as a whole. Conflicting international agendas will be discussed later today. While part of life, as some would say, we also need to take into account inclusive and transformative opportunities, and the EU promoted agenda through the Eastern Partnership. This is not an initiative based on dividing lines. A world split in spheres of influence, this is not the EU logic. And we fully respect the decisions of our partners regarding the level of association with the EU that they wish to pursue. I look forward to lively discussions and useful ideas that I can also draw on in my work in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And I now turn to Johan Sotonulu, who is the UN Special Representative for the Geneva International Discussion.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, esteemed organizers, distinguished participants, a very good morning to all of you. It is a great pleasure and an honor for me to be a part of this discussion. As you know, I assumed my role as UN representative to Geneva International Discussions in September this year. As the first woman co-chair of the process since its inception 10 years ago, I am very much indeed keen to pay bigger attention to the issues of women, peace, and security. Without women at the table, we will not be able to make much progress, whether it's about rights, whether it's about development, whether it's about security or peace. Together with my colleagues, Ambassadors Clark and Mitaka, I co-chair the 45th round of the GID in October. The round marked the 10th anniversary of the format. In mediation process, this is neither too long nor too short. What matters is what has been achieved during that period. We can say, I think, quite an amount of pride together with all the GID participants, we have managed to stabilize the security situation on the ground. Despite divergent positions on many issues, the participants have maintained their commitment to continue the dialogue in the framework of the GID. The creation of the Joint Incident Prevention and Response Mechanism, IPRM, and hotline communication have both played a very great role in maintaining stability on the ground. There are two of the IPRMs in Gali and Argneti, and they have proven their effectiveness in addressing incidents on the ground, mostly detentions for illegal crossings. Unfortunately, from time to time, these mechanisms face certain difficulties, and at the moment we are going through such period. So we are all working together to make sure that we reaffirm the principles of engagement and avoid disruption of such meetings. Our three organizations, we are convinced also that the Geneva process needs to be revitalized to properly address core issues on the agenda of GID, mainly non-use of force and humanitarian matters. As most of you know, the United Nations has been directly engaged in conflict resolution efforts in Georgia since 1993, when the UN Observer Mission in Georgia was established to address the Georgian-Abkhaz conflict. The mandate of UNOMIC was terminated after 16 years in June 2009. However, following the termination of the mission, UN established a special political mission, and this is supported by the Secretariat Department of Political Affairs in New York. However, it is also very important to note that several UN agencies and programs, such as UN Development Program, High Commissioner for Human Rights, High Commissioner for Refugees, UNICEF, they are all engaged in supporting Georgia in many fields, in particular on matters of IDPs and refugees, confidence building measures, and gender equality. This is indeed a testimony of the commitment that the UN and its member states have to peace and security in the region. In his statement in August on the 10th anniversary of the conflict, the UN Secretary General recalled that while the GID and the IPRM have continued to contributing stability in recent years, more should be done on key security and humanitarian issues, including those related to the plight of the many internally displaced persons and refugees. So the urge from the United Nations is for the participants to adopt a constructive, forward-looking approach so that the GID can fulfill its mandate. And of course, the Secretary General also urged all concerned should prioritize progress through appropriate dialogue and refrain from divisive policies and unilateral actions that may adversely impact regional peace and security. So this is a key focus of the United Nations. When we talk about building and sustaining peace in broader terms, of course, this is one of the pillars of the United Nations. The concept was redefined in 2016 by two new resolutions, and they are groundbreaking in the sense that they redefine the UN approach to peace by adapting a long-term perspective and focusing on prevention, which means that the UN efforts should go beyond addressing the immediate needs of conflict-affected people and to focus on better supporting countries to make peace last. This is the key distinction that we have after decades in the UN. The key responsibility for designing peace building and sustaining peace policies rests with the government. At the same time, the resolutions recognize that this is not just the role of the government. It has to involve all relevant stakeholders, including civil society, academia, regional, sub-regional organizations, UN, IFIs, and the private sector. To make this happen, we need to learn from good practices on the ground and also from best practices. We need to take a proactive approach and apply whatever is relevant in any given context. Maybe just to also open a little parenthesis, we have to remember that more resources are spent on responding to conflicts rather than preventing them. We need to put more money into actually preventing conflicts and sustaining peace. Now, UN member states recognize that development, peace and security, and human rights are all linked and mutually reinforcing. Respect and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, inter alia, are also encompassed in the 2016 resolutions. The UN is engaged in conflict prevention through confidence-building measures in Abkhazia and through its various organs on a variety of issues. I don't want to take too much time. I'm sure we will be able to talk about them later, but these also represent a very good cooperation between the UN and the EU, as they are EU-funded, UN-implemented projects. Just to give you an example, there is a grant-making mechanism for civil society initiatives, which also creates networking among NGOs on different parts of the region. There are grassroots activities that focus on livelihood opportunities for conflict-affected communities, and they provide access to technology, training, agricultural support. Local communities are empowered actually through these activities, and they are able to design their own economic development strategies. Let me indeed just leave you with that maybe broader perspective on peace, security, and development. As you know, in 2015, all UN member states signed off on the Agenda 2030, where it is 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the main goal of all these 17 goals is indeed to leave no one behind. And we can't do that if we don't have peace and security. And for peace and security, we need cooperation at all levels, between countries, between people, between all stakeholders. So I'm very happy to be a part of this conference. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from all the eminent scholars and other participants. Just to note that my remarks have been limited to my role as UN representative to GID, but I hope what we are advocating as the United Nations indeed is applicable to various issues that are going to be discussed here today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And now I'd like to turn to Rudolf Mitaka, who is the Special Representative of the OSCE Chairman in Office for the South Caucasus.
Well, very good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to beautiful historical Oxford and this beautiful St. Anthony's College. It's a privilege and a pleasure altogether. And thanks to Dame Audrey Glover for chairing the meeting and for a wonderful chat we had yesterday. I really appreciate. I thank to my two colleagues, Jihan Sultanoglu and Tevoklar, for who took the floor before me. Well, let me assure you that we are working closely together as a team, and it is a pleasure to be here today jointly, just a few days before our annual presentation at the OSCE Permanent Council in Vienna. I was nominated by the Italian chairperson in office as the OSCE Special Rep for South Caucasus at the beginning of September. So I've been working in this new capacity for more than 2 months. Before I was posted in Tbilisi as a Slovak ambassador for 4 years, so I can say I was not entirely new to the region and the context, whereas my current role includes taking broader considerations and the positions of the OSCE participating states into account. That's slightly different than the bilateral relations, so I'm adjusting to that. The 2 months, the last 2 months, we have been quite busy, and they've been quite intense and eventful, rich of inputs and ideas, but they were also characterized by challenging moments. The OSCE follows a comprehensive security concept, and this organization houses valuable knowledge, which is also highly relevant for the South Caucasus. This year, under the Italian chairmanship, a lot of attention was paid to this region, and besides the weekly discussions in Vienna concerning security questions and conflicts, we saw also some high-level visits to the regions. As a special representative of OSCE for South Caucasus, as you might be already aware, the main part of the job is dedicated to the conflict in Georgia. In this position, I take responsibility as co-chair of the Geneva International Discussions, just like my two colleagues here, and also a co-facilitator of the IPRM, the Incident and Prevention and Response Mechanism in Ergneti. That's on the administration boundary line with South Ossetia, jointly with the head of UMM, with whom I enjoy very close cooperation as well. Continuity, despite the annually changing chairmanships, is key here. And so I am glad to have started my engagement under Italian flag and will continue in 2018 under the Slovak chairmanship as well. The major result of discussions following the end of armed hostilities in 2008 is a significant degree of stability in the region. Discussions, peace and more security for local populations, they contribute to keeping this momentum and provide a platform for discussing important security and humanitarian issues. Yet the situation is far from satisfactory. Also within their framework, we continue to address some of the most controversial issues, some of which have been on the table since the beginning of the talks in Geneva. But the participating sides are engaged in talking to each other, and we do our best to facilitate these exchanges. My fellow co-chairs have already tackled a number of issues of concern. While the discussions continue, the population of both sides of the ABL continues to be affected by severe challenges and obstacles when it comes to education, access to water, as well as proper health care. Communities have been divided, and it's often difficult for people to visit each other, friends, relatives, on the other side of the ABL. Recently, we also observed cases of abductions and tragic death cases. We continue to stress the need to conduct proper investigations into, and cannot stop to emphasize that any perception of impunity should be avoided. Documentation in the Abkhaz and South Ossetian theaters is becoming more and more challenging issue. Clearly, not enough has been done to find solutions to facilitate freedom of movement. Where there are joint problems like posed by pests that destroy important cultural plants and crops, we could also facilitate joint research for solutions. As in the past 2 years, the OSCE chairmanship, together with the EU, for instance, supported an expert workshop with participants from Eastern Black Sea region to jointly discuss ways to deal with increasingly worrying environmental threats. Insects know no borders and dividing line, as you may imagine. The already mentioned IPRMs, those meetings at the ABL, established to bring practical solutions to daily issues affecting the population on the ground. The IPRMs are facing some temporary challenges. It is my belief, and what we put our efforts as mediators in, that the IPRMs in Ergneti will resume soon. Everybody recognizes its importance and acknowledges its crucial role, but its interruption showed once again the fragility of the format against the backdrop of a certain degree of polarization and a tough political context. Despite all the issues highlighted, we clearly sense that every participant is strongly committed to the format. And it was shown during several occasions that there is a willingness to continue the work in Geneva and on the ground. The OSCE remains fully committed to accompany and contribute to all related processes. The dedication and attitude of the co-chairs and the organizations we represent are important, but cannot replace the sincere willingness of the participants to advance their interaction and commitment to achieve tangible results. As mentioned before, my mandate covers the whole region of the South Caucasus, including Armenia and Azerbaijan. And here I am on standby for any task of the chairmanship, and in particular to support the efforts already taken when it comes to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. The chairmanship here is fully engaged via its personal representative, Ambassador Kaspchik, with whom I am in regular contact. He and his team play an important role in facilitating communication, supporting humanitarian operations, and in conducting regular monitoring exercises, which is all aimed at strengthening confidence. The Italian chairmanship and the chairperson in office, Foreign Minister Moavero, have paid a lot of attention to this conflict and fully supported the efforts of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs. I can assure you that also this conflict will receive due attention in 2019. Developments in one part of the South Caucasus always have an impact on the rest of the region and sometimes also attract the world's attention. This was certainly the case also this year with the remarkable changes in Armenia. Recently, I had the possibility to make my first official visit both to Yerevan and Baku, and we indeed hope for the security situation on the line of contact and state borders to remain stable and the negotiations to gain a new pace. I am therefore looking forward to participating in this important forum today to listen to the viewpoints of distinguished analysts and experts. Let me therefore again thank the organizers, in particular Denis Samut and Lynx, for their steadfast commitment in their field of work. We need input and ideas from civil society, and it is our aim and interest to have such kind of exchange where possible and feasible. This I conclude my remarks and will be happy to also answer any of your questions if possible. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rudolf. Thank all of you very much indeed.